Welcome to the Nordic Mythology Podcast. I'm Daniel Farron, co-owner of the company Horns of Odin, and I'm joined, as always, by Dr. Mathias Nordvik.
Hello, everybody.
You sound a bit better this week.
I am a little bit better this week. Oh, the dog is barking.
Let's leave it in. Let's not restart. Dogs are amazing.
Yeah. No,
He's just saying hello.
She's probably barking at the moose. This morning I couldn't get out of my front door because there was a giant moose in front of it.
And they are big.
They are big, yeah.
I remember I didn't know how big a moose was until I Googled it, and then they look like those things off Star Wars. That's how big those fuckers are. The little walking, I don't know, those mechanical moose-like creatures, I guess.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it's so big. Someone said the ATAT. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. But they're a lot bigger than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
they're taller than I am.
That's
the back of a moose is like 6 foot 10 or something like that. Like they're huge.
Yeah, because obviously we don't have them in the UK, so you see pictures of them maybe in the woods on TV shows, but you don't really get scale until they're stood maybe next to a car or something, or a person.
Yep.
And then you realize
how in the backyard. So
that would be pretty cool. Just to start off, this episode is me and Mathias once again. We're going to sit down and talk about some short topics, possibly rant. If we sound a little bit different, we've got different things going on sound quality wise. Maybe just bear with us. I'm trying to build a studio-ish type thing, which is going to be hopefully coming in the next couple of weeks. I know, Mathias, you're sometimes in your office, sometimes at home, so we're bear with us if we sound a little different, but hopefully the quality won't drop too much. Fingers crossed. Anyway, we'll see.
Fingers crossed.
No, Shan will do an amazing job. It's just if things sound a little different episode to episode, just bear with us whilst we get everything that we're doing set up.
I think actually the recordings that I do in my office sound better than the recordings that I'm doing at home in my intimistic studio, and that's because I got a bunch of T-shirts for a CU Boulder's Nordic Club lying around.
Wow.
So I can use them to like pad it.
I mean, I want a CU Boulder Nordic Club T-shirt, please.
They're at least 5, maybe 7 years old. Like somebody got them at some point for some competition, and then
I thought these would go
stuck with them.
Somebody thought these would go really well. Everybody wants one of these.
Yep. And there's the funniest thing is that there's like a map of Scandinavia with like a circle around it. And nobody knows what it is. Everybody is always asking, what's that?
We need to repurpose these T-shirts somehow. We need to recycle them and somehow turn them to our benefit. I'm not sure how yet. So how are things with you? How's life? How's teaching?
Well, so I mean, as mentioned, I started the morning being barred from exiting my own house because there was like a giant mama moose and her calf hanging out right in front of my door, eating the tree that we have next to the door. So that's how my morning started. Then I spent a couple of hours on the phone with the Social Security office.
You're not getting kicked out already, are you?
No, actually, I'm trying to avoid. Here in the US, they have stopped offering in-person services at their offices. So you have to like go online, or if you're a pesky foreigner like me, you'll have to call them because you can't just do the things online. So that was great for my blood pressure. I was on the phone waiting for somebody to pick up for 2 hours, and nothing happened. and I still haven't gotten
Oh,
anywhere with my endeavors. The
I get
awesome
angry if I'm on hold for 10 minutes.
Exactly, right? So you can imagine just how angry I've been.
2 hours is ridiculous. That
It was
is
crazy.
no,
Like,
that's horrible. That is absolutely horrible. So yeah, I'm really busy, stressed. I don't know, running around like a blue ass fly. I don't know if you have that saying in America.
no, I don't
That
think
is that a
so.
British thing? I don't
Yeah.
know where it comes from. Blue ass fly. I don't know. Apparently that's what that.
Blue ass fly.
I probably don't even know the saying properly. It's probably not even that. It's something probably something completely different. But that's what I've been saying for 32 years. Um, so yeah, Eddie, the guy that works for me, he's got married last week. We went to his wedding. It was beautiful. Had a lovely time. So he's off for 3 weeks. A week before the wedding and 2 weeks after for his honeymoon. And I'm now realizing how much work he actually does. Like I appreciate him a lot now. So I've got a young lad I found to help me out, and it's been not very good, not very good at all. He we're meant to he's meant to start at 8:30, which isn't a bad time, I don't think, to start. That's a reasonable time.
Yes, yeah.
So he texts me. This is the second time this has happened. He texts me at 8:30 saying, "I'm gonna take my sister to school. I'll be there at 9:30." I'm like, okay. I mean, I'm guessing you've probably actually just woken up since you've texted me at 8:30 when you're meant to start. You could have texted me a little bit earlier. And then he did maybe what 3 hours work. And I was like, okay, just go get lunch. We got to like a point. I'm like, go get some lunch, come back in half an hour or whatever, and we'll get back on. An hour and 15 minutes go by. I'm like, where's this motherfucker? Where is he? Where's he gone? So waited 15 more minutes, looked at my phone, and I just got a text saying, "Oh, sorry, I went home, then I didn't feel too well. So I'm just gonna, do you mind if I just stay here for the afternoon?" And I was
Wow.
like,
How
what? In whose world is that acceptable?
How old is this kid?
18. So he is,
No, 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 no. That's the kind of stuff you pull when you're 13.
yeah, that's
Like,
true.
you know.
It's like you were sat outside in your car. You could have just come inside and gone, look, I don't feel too well. I'm a nice guy. I'd be like, look, go home. Don't worry about it. I'll see you tomorrow. And then it was the fact like an hour and a half later, I just got a text like, sorry, gone home. Don't feel well. I'm like, you're
No,
mental. That's not what people do. That's not acceptable. So
that's not.
I don't think he'll be helping me out. I think I'll just survive on my own until
Yeah,
my good Eddie gets back.
yeah. No, it's that sounds like a kid who needs to learn a little bit about both time management and also communication.
Mm-hmm.
Should have
Yeah,
learned that long time ago, but I guess you got to start somewhere.
I know. Honestly, I couldn't believe it. When I got the message. I was like, just, it doesn't comprehend to me that that's what you would do. Like you wouldn't just come in and be like, look, I'm sorry, I don't feel good. That's not that's not an issue. I wouldn't mind just go home, feel better. But to go home and then be like, yeah, I went home, don't feel good. I mean, no, you've gone home, you've sat down, and now you don't want to come back to work. Is what's happened.
Exactly.
So he shall be no more.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Sorry you had to deal with that.
Well, it just means that I've got to try and do two people's jobs whilst trying to do everything else. So it's busy at the minute, but we'll be fine. And
Yeah.
I for some reason, I decided to release a Halloween special Horns of Odin T-shirt as well, like in the last minute. No reason, didn't have to do it. I was like, oh, I know what'll be cool, a Halloween T-shirt. Let's put more stress on myself. So yeah, that was fun. But if you want one, we're only printing 100 of them. Artwork by the Saxon storyteller. He's done a Draugr design. It's really cool.
Nice.
So you can pick one of those if there's any left. So yeah, let's get into the show. Let's talk the topic.
Oh, I just have to tell you one thing. It started snowing here.
Oh, okay, already.
Yeah, it's like as we Danes say, it looks like Christmas.
Already. I
Yeah.
mean, what we're in October?
Yeah, early October, right? So
No, we don't get. We probably don't get it now until April. It's ridiculous. When I was a kid, we used to get it around Christmas, and now it just holds off longer and longer. It's Easter time when it snows now.
Wow, that's weird.
Yeah, it feels really weird. It's an odd thing, especially like as a kid. I grew up with it being snowy. So,
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I remember that. Like, when I was a teenager back in the 90s, you could still get like proper blizzards in Denmark. I don't think they get blizzards that much anymore. There was a couple of years ago, there was a week of blizzards in Denmark, but I think it's mostly just rain.
Yeah.
So.
Well, welcome to England. That's what we get. All right. So my topic this week is one that I've been wondering about for a long time, and I'm hoping you're going to know the answer. We've had a brief chat on it before, I think. And that is, there is such a big following of Viking culture in South America. And I think maybe people who, I mainly notice it because I own a business. So if I look at the analytics of Instagram or Facebook or any of those things, the most people who view our content, whether it's Instagram or Facebook, I think it's the USA, then it's the UK, and it's always Brazil. Like, it's always Brazil above Canada, France, any of the Scandinavian countries. It's always Brazil. And I never understood why. And I didn't know whether there was a link. And I hoped maybe you would have an answer for that.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things to be said about that. If we look at current popular culture all over, pretty much south of the border of the US, like if you go to Mexico, you can go to Colombia, Chile, Argentina, Brazil, you will find a lot of people who like and enjoy heavy metal. Right?
Okay.
I mean, so when mainstream bands like Iron Maiden are playing in Brazil, it's like a 200,000 crowd, right? That's a pretty standard thing. And I don't know if they even pull that much here in the US any longer, but they do down there. And so this, I don't think that that's any secret to anybody that people who like heavy metal also tend to gravitate towards things like Viking stuff and Nordic mythology.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one answer to this, that basically the interest in Viking stuff and Northern Europe and all that stuff basically goes hand in hand with the interest in heavy metal.
It does always seem to be Brazil in particular. That's kind of the one that I found really interesting. That I'm not saying it's not the other South American countries, but it always seems to be Brazil that stands out.
Well, Brazil is a big and very diverse country too. How many are they closing in on 200 million people? I think something like that. There's a lot of people in Brazil, right? Yeah. And so that makes a lot of sense too. It's sort of like the US of South America, if you ask me.
That's I know, right? But it just seems so bizarre that it would be, like I say, it's literally the third biggest, especially people who like our stuff. And I guess that's the same for, I know I've spoke to Tom who runs Razor Storm, and his is the same. And it's the US, UK, Brazil. And you would just assume by the nature of what it is, it would maybe be one of the Scandinavian countries or a European country that has maybe a closer direct link to Viking culture. But I don't know, Brazil always just felt like such an anomaly to have up there.
I don't know. To me, it makes sense. The Scandinavians they're not necessarily that interested in their own background and history. Like,
okay, yes.
They're more interested in I don't know, the latest pop culture item, and the Kardashians or some shit like that.
That's an American TV getting pumped in.
exactly. But you have a lot more, diverse and interesting people in Brazil. And this brings me to the other subject of this, and that is or the other, I would say, primary reason, and that is there's a lot of people with Northern European heritage in Brazil, just like in Argentina and Chile and plenty of other places, Mexico, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people. So, and I don't think anybody really knows this, or it's not really something that's talked a lot about. But oh, there's that moose again, by the way. It just came by.
There we go.
I don't think a lot of people really talk about this, but so the biggest um, immigrant heritage group, or whatever you want to call it, in the United States is German. Like the biggest group of Americans to identify with like an ethnicity, they actually identify with German heritage. And there are huge German populations and also Scandinavian populations in South America and in Central America too.
Mm-hmm.
The people who migrated there in the 19th century, just like they did to North America. And of course, Brazilians with, German background or Scandinavian background also, take an interest in, Viking history and all that stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely also part of it. And I mean, this is also what I hear from, I talk to a bunch of people from several South American countries, and they usually, like, some of the things that they tell me is that, well, they're interested in this stuff because their grandfather came from, somewhere in Northern Europe, or they have some kind of bond, heritage bond with Northern Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's it's pretty common.
So, do you think it has any links with the? I guess the obvious question is with the mass migration of Nazis to Argentina in the 1940s. Because obviously,
No.
we spoke about on the show before, and you do obviously there is a big issue within this culture, I guess, with white supremacists. And then if you see, obviously, anybody that doesn't know, there was a huge Nazi influx into Argentina, and I think there still is some sort of colonies of Nazis kind
So,
of.
actually, the already existing Northern European communities, and particularly German communities, immigrant communities in Brazil and Argentina and Chile, um, um, were the precursor for the Nazis, going there and hiding. Like the communities were already there. They weren't really established that much by the Nazis.
Okay.
So it's like the Nazis just had the opportunity to go to places like that and disappear, right?
Okay. I
Um,
see. I was always under the impression that they went
it wasn't
and
like a
set up
big
the.
exodus of Nazis. It was actually I think, that whole thing has been mythologized and blown out of
Maybe.
proportion more than anything else,
Mm-hmm.
because there wasn't that many. And most of the Nazis who escaped to South America, they were later handled by Mossad. Isn't that what the Israeli Secret Service is called?
Yeah, I think they did go and
They did go
cap-
and
capture a few.
captured and also disappeared a couple. But there are also, I mean, so but we should also not discount that Nazi influence actually had severe impact. I mean, I'm as far as I'm aware of the history of Pinochet's dictatorship in Chile. He would not have been able to do that if he to establish his dictatorship, first of all, without American backing, but aside from that, also without help from some of those Nazis who had escaped to Chile. There's documentary about a really, really fucked up Nazi established community that had some kind of role to play in all that. So that's also a thing to consider, that some of those dictatorships post World War II in South America, they if nothing else had Nazi consultants in different ways.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, that's why I always wondered whether the two kind of maybe leaned into each other, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, the communities of like Germans especially, they were established long before. But you know, it's Argentina is an interesting country when it comes to like Northern European migration. You can still find like fully like ethnically and linguistically like Swedish and Danish communities in Argentina. Like, is it you if you go there as a Dane, it's like visiting some weird religious community from the 19th century where they all speak like they were still in the 19th century.
That's that's insane. I've heard that about Quebec as well. When I was in Canada, my sister lives in Vancouver, and she was snowboarding with a guy from France, and he was telling me that apparently in Quebec they speak, because they've been isolated away from France for so long, that they speak a very old version of French, and it's almost hard for a modern day French person to understand the French that they speak in Quebec.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. Like you can see the same thing with some of the Spanish that's being spoken over here, and Portuguese as well. Some of it is, as far as I've been told, sounds a little archaic to you know, Europeans, Spanish speakers and Portuguese speakers.
It feels so odd to think of there being Swedish and Danish settlements in Argentina. I don't know why. Like, I'm British, I'm like, yeah, of course there'll be some British ones because we went everywhere and we're horrible to everyone. But I don't know, like Swedish.
I mean, so this is, you know, the Brits, they get all the bad rap for colonization and so on. Sometimes the French as well. But let's just be clear on something, and that is basically that the Scandinavians, right? We're sort of like, you know, in the schoolyard, right? When somebody's bullying you, right? There's like the bully, and then there's his backup team, right? And there's always that little shitty, very short kid who stands behind them all, egging them on, being like, yeah, go kick his ass, go kick his ass, right?
That's actually Matthias doing that. That's not a sound effect put in after by Shan either. That was him, I assure you.
That's the Scandinavians.
Okay.
Yeah, so like for instance, like the Belgian rape of the Congo, the horrible genocide that the Belgian King Leopold exacted on the Congo. That right there, you know, there was like thousands of Danes and Norwegians and Swedes involved in that shit too. So, and it's the same elsewhere in Africa. You could, until Mugabe kicked out the white farmers in Zimbabwe, there was plenty of Danish farmers there too, and other Scandinavians. So like they've always been there in one way or another, just like been flying under the radar, and now we're like the good European nation.
One thing this is a little bit off topic, but I've always thought it's interesting how some of the biggest empires, especially European empires, are the smallest countries. So obviously you have like us, Denmark, Belgium, the Netherlands, Portugal. Like these all had giant empires at some point, but yet they're the smallest countries. And I guess maybe it's because we're surrounded by water and we have good naval fleets, maybe.
No, it's the potato.
Do you really? Or are you lying to me?
No. Well, look, potatoes, right? In terms of like nutritious food to appear on the European continent in the 1500s, the potato is a fucking powerhouse, right?
I mean, I do like to pick up some mashed potato.
Oof. Right? Yes. So what happens? What happens in the 1500s? You have these Spanish and English that come back from the Americas with potatoes. They start growing them in Europe, right? And what happens next is that because of there's the for anybody looking, there's the moose right outside
Oh,
my
there he
window.
is. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So anybody, if you do want to watch the episode, you find it on YouTube. We post the episodes on there so you can see the moose. And Mathias has just broke his fourth wall because he has a green screen up of the forest behind him, and everybody always thinks he's sat in the forest, but
yeah, no, there's a giant moose staring at me right now.
yeah, that's even though you're inside, I still would feel a little on edge.
I mean, I have seen pictures of, or not pictures, videos of moose crashing through windows in Norway. So yeah. It's something to watch out for. Anyway, where was I? What was I talking? I was talking about potatoes.
Potatoes.
Yes. So what happens is essentially that you have a population boom in Europe. You have a huge population surplus from the 1600s and onwards. This, along with the potato, you have improved living conditions, sanitary conditions, and so on for a lot of people as well. And basically what this then drives is, of course, like a human surplus, in the sense of there are too many people for too little land. Mm-hmm. And those people, they start moving out, right? And that's why you have the big migrations from Europe. You have a lot of Europeans that you can send to the Americas, for instance, or to Africa, and that's why the Europeans then have the upper hand for a couple of centuries. Those demographics and things are starting to change now, and become different in one way or another. Right, like what we're seeing in Europe is, for instance, an influx from Africa and from Asia, right? Mm-hmm. And essentially, despite what some people might say, it's a needed influx because this has been the case since World War II. The European populations aren't as productive as other populations in the world, so we've needed workers, right? And that's why we started to get workers from Turkey and elsewhere in the late 50s and in the 60s. UK got workers from the Caribbean, right? The Windrush generation and so on. I mean,
right? Our government needs to do something to get some workers now, because we have no truck drivers, and everything is. I mean,
maybe we all need to get back into the EU.
I mean, some things they need to figure. I mean, if I was in charge, I would pass a bill to allow foreign work a lot easier, because I was hearing on the news today that the ships are being turned away from the ports because there's just such a backlog, because there isn't enough truck drivers to get things around the country.
But that's not just because of that. That is also coronavirus mismanagement policies of various kinds. We're seeing this globally right now. I mean, truck drivers, sailors, all of those logistics workers out there, right? They're the ones who are moving between countries. They've been doing that all along, right? Mm-hmm. But they haven't been able to with all the pandemic shutdowns, right? So what we're suffering from now is the whole backlog from them starting to shut down in 2020, right?
Mm-hmm. And I guess extra red tape or safety procedures makes a big difference, because I imagine they were running pretty close to the line all the time. Anyway, everything had to be kind of on point. You had to be there when you had to be there. And now if you have to take an extra 10, 15 minutes to, even though it probably doesn't sound like much to do a COVID test, when you're talking thousands of shipments every day, it has a big knock-on effect.
Yeah. And you're seeing this all over the world. Like here in the US, we have the same thing. Like the big port in, I think it's in LA. There's just like, you know, maybe like towards 100 ships just like lying outside of it, waiting to get in.
That's insane.
It really is. But you know, this all of this stuff really reveals a couple of other things. That is, as a global society, we are so interwoven
Mhm.
in so many ways that we can't escape that situation, regardless of how isolationist we want to be. Like the US can get by with a lot of things on its own, but it's still, you know, so connected with all these other countries that, you know, you can't escape the situation. The UK neither, right?
It's because
Like,
you get used to certain things. It's even just down to fruit and veg. Obviously, when 10, 15, 20 years ago, you used to eat the seasonal fruit and veg. That's how it was. You ate what was grown at the time. Whereas now you want, or people just get used to it. I'm a sucker for it as well. I want sweet corn all year round. I want asparagus all year round. I want all these things all
yeah,
year that have to be shipped in or flown in. And it's like, and if it's not on the shelf, I'm like, oh, why not? I want that today,
exactly.
now. And
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
how we've kind of been brought up to be now. It's how it is. You want everything. And,
Yeah.
and it all is like that. Amazon, the fuckers for it.
And that's the thing, like for a couple of weeks, I noticed that all of a sudden there were no oranges in any of the stores around here.
Mhm.
And you know, I hadn't heard anything about it or anything like that, but I assume that it's simply a supply issue, that they, for some reason, shipments of oranges just couldn't reach Colorado. So
I bet you were
now they're
craving an
back.
orange as well.
Well, actually, this is you know, at the height of the Corona thing, and I was actually craving oranges because I think my body was like, hey, up your vitamin C intake, man.
It's more like when somebody tells you you can't have something, you're like, I want that now.
I want it.
I want an orange. All right. Okay. So I think I've got a little bit of a better understanding as to why there's such an interest in this culture down in South America. Now, I know nothing about your topic. I asked you, and you just said the way they lived. I was like,
Yes.
all right, let's see what happens
Yes.
because I have
Well,
no idea where we're going with this.
okay. So, well, the thing is that, you know, it's sort of like an overlooked topic. You know, the physical surroundings of Vikings. Like, what did people actually like? What did they live in? How did they live? What was their physical area like? You know, built structures and also natural structures and so on in the Viking Age, right? Like you see a show like the Vikings, and then you know, first of all, it's like the structures, the buildings that they live in. I don't know if you noticed, but you can like see holes through them, right? Like you can see the outside through the walls sometimes. And it's like if they tried to live like that in Norway in the Viking Age, they'd all be dead. Like,
You'd be cold.
you'd be very cold. And you know, it's also a thing. It's sort of like a barbarianism that these kinds of shows, when they're, you know, when they're making the sets for I bitched about this on my blog when it came to this show Barbarians, which was about like the Germanic tribes standing up against the Romans and all that stuff in the first couple of centuries AD. The buildings look like they were built by chimps or something like that. It's like, these like big weird logs that were just like put together with giant nails, and it's like that's not how they would be building things. I mean, we're
No.
dealing with people who have for millennia adapted to living in Northern Europe, right? They know what they're doing. And of course, they would never live in housing that was, you know, in any way compromised in terms of letting the wind and weather inside, right?
No, that's a good point because probably for I'm going to guess here 99% of people listening to this I imagine, get their idea of what things look like in the Viking Age from TV shows, and that's me included, because obviously we're not there, we can't see it. Yeah, you kind of get maybe a description in books, but obviously visual things always last longer. They leave a longer memory. You take notice of them a little bit, maybe a little bit more. So when I see them on TV shows, I'm kind of like, oh, that's probably what it looked like. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I think what's that movie called with Christian Bale from like the 90s or 80s? I think I've mentioned it before.
What happens in it?
It's a movie about it's a movie about the real Hamlet. The real Hamlet was a prince of Jutland in Denmark. The story is recorded in Saxo's History of the Danes, and I have not actually seen proper scholarship explaining how Shakespeare ever got to the point of like taking that tale and then turning it into his story about Hamlet. It's still very iffy for me, like how did that actually happen? But Shakespeare must have had access to some historical writings on this subject at some point. But Hamlet was a prince in Jutland. He was portrayed by his uncle, and sort of like the same storyline as we know it from Hamlet. He's a lot less emo compared to Hamlet, but the story is or the movie is actually known as Royal Deceit, and it's Gabriel Byrne and Helen Mirren and Christian Bale who have some of the primary roles in the movie. And yeah, it's sort of like the real historical version of Hamlet, based off of Saxo's story in the History of the Danes.
Somebody's shouting at this now, telling us what it's called.
Is what now?
Somebody's shouting at it, telling us what this film's called. Have you found it?
I was just looking at it. It says Royal Deceit.
Oh, that's what it's called. I thought you said it was a story about Royal Deceit.
No. The title
okay.
is Royal Deceit, but you can also find it under the title Prince of Jutland.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, what I was going to say about that movie is that movie is probably the best example of a fairly big and popular movie, historical movie about the Scandinavian past. So this would have taken place technically before the Viking Age, but it's sort of like leading up to the Viking Age, where actually the clothes and the scenery and setups and all of that stuff are actually historically accurate. Because as far as I remember, they went to some reconstructed village in Jutland where they actually filmed this, or maybe it was in Zealand. But so they've used reconstructed houses and everything as the backdrop for that movie. I strongly recommend actually watching it because it's kind of cool.
So you use that to get an idea of how it actually was.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I know you said obviously on Vikings that you can see through the walls. What typically would a house have been made of? Obviously wood, but do we know like how accurately, I guess, do we know that how they were built?
So we know pretty accurately how they built houses and what materials they used. And obviously the first thing that we need to realize is that they use different materials depending on where we are in Scandinavia, right? Or the North Atlantic, right? So in southern Scandinavia, what we see, first of all, what we see is there's not a lot of innovation or change in how they built buildings or settlement patterns or anything like that from the Stone Age up until the end of the Viking Age. Now, the end of the Viking Age, that's when things start to change. The beginning of the Viking Age, they're pretty much living the same way as they would in the Bronze Age or earlier, right? That's the first thing we need to consider. And we're not seeing a lot of like demographic shifts or anything like that until the end of the Viking Age too. That's because of farming techniques and all those things. They don't change much over that time period from the sedentary Stone Age where people are building farms with their flint axes and all that stuff, and then until the Viking Age where of course we have iron and all that stuff, and things have changed fundamentally. The wheel plow is being introduced, fertilizer probably also being introduced in this time period. That changes, of course, the production and output of the fields, which then, of course, means that can supply or support more people, right? But so in southern Scandinavia, what you have are houses built from, interlaced sticks, like the walls are like interlaced sticks that are then encased in mud, right? Okay. And that the structure of such a house in the early Viking Age, there would be like 3-aisled houses. So you would have 2 rows of pillars in the middle of the house, and then some pillars away from them on each side. And then, of course, the wall pillars, right? Okay. The walls themselves wouldn't be supporting the roof. It would be pillars that are supporting the roof. Right. And so you basically have like that wood frame, and then for the walls, you put in those interlaced sticks. First,
you see them used for fencing quite often. I guess is a cheap,
for instance,
easy way to make a fence. It's literally just some stiff uprights, I guess, some bigger sticks upright, and then you weave in and out
exactly
more bendy sticks, I guess.
Yeah, and then you make all of that more impervious to pardon me, to the wind and weather by adding clay on both sides, right, of those sticks. There's probably also sometimes some hay involved or some something like that to make it more durable, and also insulated better. Okay, so what do you have aside from that, right? You have that house, and then it would be a thatched roof typically, right? Or using straw, right? The straw roof, which you still see in Northern Europe, and Denmark, and you can find it in Germany and the Netherlands as well. Like, I'm pretty sure you can find some houses with straw roof in the UK too. Right?
Oh yeah, they tend to be more southernly, kind of like the Wiltshire. The Wiltshire area, you definitely get some thatched roofs, and they do look lovely. They cost you a lot. Right? They cost you a lot because they need replacing every like 10 years or something. But they do look very nice.
Oh, the insurance for that stuff, because that they'll burn immediately. Right?
Yeah, it's definitely not the best thing to make a roof out of. But it looks pretty, and that's all that matters sometimes.
So that's how they would build a house, right? And they would have a dirt floor. And then they would have, the sides would be raised, and then you would have a fireplace in the middle. And in many cases, what we actually see is that half of the house is stables, right? So you can walk straight from your bed into the stables, and that's usually also where people would be relieving themselves. So taking a shit next to the horse and that kind of stuff.
I bet it smelled. I bet it smelled lovely in there.
Right.
Bet it was. I mean, so it's so easy on the TV shows to focus on the longhouses because obviously I guess they did exist, but not everybody lived in these big, lavish longhouses.
No.
But you can see why on TV shows they like to show those because they look nice. Certainly looks a lot better than this little mud hut with a thatched roof,
Right.
with horses in it. But I guess most people would have lived that way. And you wouldn't, I assume anyway, that you wouldn't make your house too big either. It would be just big enough because obviously the bigger the space, especially the higher the space, the harder it is to keep warm.
Exactly.
And being warm is a big thing.
Yeah. And that's another thing to keep in mind here. Aside from like things like, you could probably use this the space up top in under the roof and all that stuff. You could probably use that for certain things, like maybe you can hang a sausage there and like let it smoke slowly or something like that. Cure very slowly. Holy shit, that's that moose again right outside my window. I don't know what they're doing. They seem to be like playing in the snow out there. Anyway, but aside from that, you can't really use that space for much more than storage and those kinds of things, because you wouldn't be able to sleep up there if you. This is actually something that a team of archaeologists have found out in Denmark. Like like living in one of those reconstructed houses actually seems to have been pretty dangerous when it comes to carbon monoxide poisoning.
Well, that's what I was actually going to bring up, being an ex-heating engineer and all. And I think to have a little understanding about carbon monoxide. Obviously, you don't want any holes in your house because it gets cold. They don't have glass for windows and then a nice little thing you can open. But obviously, if you've got a fire in there, you also don't want to fill that place with smoke, but more importantly, carbon monoxide.
Yeah.
So how did they deal with that? Because they wouldn't have had a chimney. I know Romans learned fairly quickly that you have to have a hole up the top somewhere to let they obviously didn't understand carbon monoxide, but to let the bad gases out.
So you would find a couple of windows here and there in some of those house structures, but even more so, there would be holes on each side of the gable, usually, or in each gable, so to speak, so that it would be able to come out that way. But you would still have a situation with a lot of smoke in the general living space. And sleeping close to the ground would then prevent you from dying from carbon monoxide poisoning.
Yeah, I mean, let's take a minute just to picture that, because anybody that's been around a fire, especially, I guess they're not burning plastics and that kind of thing. So because there's always some knob that throws some plastic on the fire, and you see the dark smoke that comes off it. At least with maybe cleaner woods, it's not going to be too smoky, but it's still going to be fairly smoky. It's not going to be, you wouldn't want it just there. And obviously with modern chimneys, obviously they work on air pressure because they're high up and you get the wind going past, which pulls the smoke up. But they don't have that. If you've just got two holes, you're just relying on obviously heat rising and the smoke going out, but that's not that efficient. So and you're going to have your fire on a lot because you want to keep warm, you want to cook. It's imperative to your survival. So they must have had sore eyes, put it that way. Sore eyes and sore throats. Everyone must have just spoke with like like you last week.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, they all must have sounded pretty sexy though, to be fair.
Right.
Just very raspy.
Very raspy, deep voices.
I mean, it must have been an unpleasant thing. Anybody who complains of how we have things now, And some people have worse situations than others, and it's not always perfect. But you get these people like, oh, I wish I was alive in the Viking Age, and it's like,
No, you
no,
don't, man.
no, no. Just take a minute and think about it, because it wouldn't be nice. We live in the best time ever to be alive, for hygiene, for health, for everything. It's just the best time to be alive, and that's
Materially,
unarguable.
absolutely, yes, yes.
Because,
We're very blessed in that sense.
but yeah, if we just, like I say, if we just take a minute to really think about how it would have been you're in a small room. I mean, I would have loved all the animals being around. That I can't complain about that. I would have liked the stables being inside. But you've got the animals in there who are shitting,
Mhm.
they will smell, they're there, making noise, not wanting to sleep when you want to sleep, just generally ruffling around, I guess. Then you've got people going to the toilet in the corner, pissing, shitting, whatever else. You've got the smoke. You have the smell of, I guess, from just the meat or the flesh of things that you're killing to
Mhm.
eat. That's either uncooked, cooked. Then people are just going to smell in general, because they're not going to be
Mhm.
washing. Certainly not as much as we do today.
Mhm.
Um,
And they wouldn't have access to soap or
no,
right, anything. Well, they found ways. I think I've mentioned this before, right? That like garlic, for instance, we know this from the medieval period. That garlic was used for people to chew on to sort of mask the smell of their rotten teeth.
I
I think
mean,
that tells you everything, right?
I
It tells you
definitely,
everything about that life. Like if you're chewing garlic to smell better, right?
it definitely weeded out the vampires as well.
That too, right?
No, I mean that. Yeah, that does. The fact that the garlic is the go-to, it's like
Right?
that's your chewing gum. Yeah, have some garlic.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it can't have been, certainly now for them. I guess it was just normal, and the smells were the smells. You get nose blind is a thing. If you're
Mhm.
around, because I've had maybe not some friends, but I've worked around some people who smell. Like,
Mhm.
there's one person, I'm not going to name him, but he smelled, and I mean every day, and it was like an old smell, just like an old dirty smell. And he had a
Mhm.
girlfriend, and I was just like, how, like how is that a thing? But I guess she must just got used to it. Just
Yeah,
You just get used to bad smells.
yeah. That's how it is, right? No, yes, that's definitely a thing that there would have been a lot of smells that people probably didn't really realize were there because they were so used to them, right?
Mhm.
Um,
For us
but yeah,
going back, though, I bet it would be a shock to the system.
it probably would be, yes.
It would not be, no, it would not be nice. So, I mean, I guess that's just your average house. Um, how many people? I guess how many people would live in?
Yeah, so that's the next thing, right? So you would be pretty crowded, right? It would be single family houses typically, but those families would be bigger than what we consider family today. You would have, maybe like at least three generations of people living in there, right? Like you could expect to have your grandparents and that kind of stuff
Mhm.
there too. Um,
I This is one thing I've never thought of before, but I assume that when you say grandparents, it's not like grandparents today. I imagine they would be younger, because everybody would have children much
right.
younger.
Well, yeah. So that's another thing. So when do women start producing kids in that society? Well, you could probably find them all the way down to 12,
Mhm,
13-year olds who are having children.
mhm.
Which, by the way, what we know from societies in modern times where that is happening, that can be very devastating for the body for a woman.
Mhm.
Um, so that's also another issue, right?
Yeah,
Life expectancy wouldn't be that long.
no. I mean,
Right.
it sounds so abhorrent now, thinking
Mhm.
12, 13-year-olds, but I guess a less civilized, less educated group of people, it was just as crude as it may sound, as soon as a girl comes on a period and is able to bear child, then that's how it was.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and Sarah is bringing up that menstruation could have started later due to lack of nutrition. That's of course a possibility. I mean, that's another aspect of life in that time period. You can't necessarily expect to have the same, as we were just talking about before. We get peeved when when we can't find oranges because there's a supply chain issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a supply chain issue. It's not a production issue, right? They would have production issues when it comes to producing food. Like sometimes you run into bad weather, famine ensues, those kinds of things. And that of course also has something to say in terms of when people would be when women would be able to have children. But one thing that usually overrides nature is culture, right? So if, for instance, it was customary to marry off your daughter, for instance, at the age of 12, 13, 14, you would do it anyway. Mm-hmm. So there are there's a lot of things to take into consideration with that. But yeah, what is life expectancy in the time period? Well, we're dealing with like 35, 40 years old.
I'd be fucked. I'm almost
right, me
there.
too, man. Like I'm like almost 40. I'm like and so that also means then that the expectation of people for people to do things, right, is much earlier. And you if you're a young man who belongs to the class of people who are expected to, for instance, go to war, well, you would probably be doing that at the age of 13 or something like that, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And if you're a young woman who's expected to have kids, you would probably be doing that, starting on that at the age of 13.
I guess you do things as soon as you can. If you're manning the farm and you've got children who are 12, 13-year old and they can help you out and make the work a little bit easier, then they're gonna be doing that work so you can all eat a little bit better and hopefully have more crops, more food, more to sell. Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing, right? So how many kids do you have? Well, you have as many as you can get. Yeah. And how many of those survive, right? That's another question. Like how many survive past the age of like 3, 4, 7 and so on. So there are so many other circumstances that would make life incredibly shitty for a Viking, so to speak.
It doesn't sound good.
No. But what we have covered so far in terms of life and life expectancy and all those things is actually only southern Scandinavia. When we go north, right? If we go to Iceland, obviously wood was a material that was used all over for building.
Before we get off the topic of childbirth, I just want to give a shout out to all the women that gave birth in the Viking Age, or in general, it's a pretty amazing thing. But
prior to modern hospitals.
Yeah, prior to modern hospitals, that's not saying it's not hard. Before anybody shouts at me, I imagine it's still incredibly difficult now. But prior to modern hospitals, it must have been horrible. Like absolutely fucking horrible. And in particular in the Viking Age, well, in the conditions we're talking about, it must have just been the worst thing possible. I can't imagine anything worse. And also just the huge risk on health, on infection. It can't have ever been a nice, pleasant situation.
Agreed, man. Agreed.
Yeah. So I just wanted to give a little bit of love to all the women who have ever gone through that, because I wouldn't. I'd be the only person who didn't have kids.
And yeah, and that, also includes the women today who don't have access to modern amenities of those kinds,
Hmm.
because there's plenty of those out there.
Hmm.
Yeah. All right. So moving to the North Atlantic, right? Well, as I mentioned, wood was used all over, but wood is harder to come by in Iceland, the Faroe Islands, um, Greenland, of course, parts of northern Norway as well. So what they were using there was turf, right? Turf and stone.
Okay.
So
Yes,
imagine a hobbit hole.
stone's something that I never really think of when I think of Viking, or at least like Viking Age houses. It's always wood.
Yeah, no, it's there's very little wood involved in the construction of buildings in the North Atlantic. Of course, there is some, as I said, but they would not be the primary material. It would be stone and turf.
How north are we talking just to get a?
Well, we're talking about Iceland, for instance. We're talking
Okay.
about the Faroe Islands too. We're talking about northern Norway too,
Okay.
and Greenland, right? Um, and go to the Lord of the Rings, right? Find Bilbo's house, and make that dark and danky instead. And that's how a Viking would be living in the North Atlantic.
Did they have cool round doors?
No, they didn't. They seem to have been rectangular.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I mean, that does make sense for a type of house if you want practicality of. I mean, the main function is shelter and warmth.
Hmm. And what do you want? You want like really, really thick walls, like close to a meter thick, right?
Mhm.
To keep all the winter cold out.
Mhm.
And can you expect to have wood to burn throughout the winter period? No, because we're dealing with sparsely wooded areas here. I mean, there's still the debate about whether or not Iceland had forests when Vikings showed up. They probably had some, or the country probably had some, but it took them very, very short time to chop all of that stuff down, and then we were done, right? Then you have to import proper wood, because you can't grow that in Iceland, not at that time. So
Uh,
so yeah, they were they would be pining for wood. Haha. And even more so in Greenland, even more so there. That would be even worse. So what could you use instead um, for like burning and keeping warm and so on?
Whale blubber.
Exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
and
I've,
seal
I've
blubber.
learned something.
Yeah. So if they were using that, that also means then that there would be a lot of soot on the inside of the walls. There would be a very particular smell.
I mean, I've never been around burnt whale blubber before.
It's it's an experience.
Does it? I mean, does it give off much heat?
It can so I mean, we know from Inuit, for instance, that the way that they use these oil lamps and so on, that was efficient. That was efficient for heating up the houses that they were living in.
I guess if they're well insulated enough, along with the body heat and a small fire,
Mhm.
it would soon heat up enough to be comfortable.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's like, don't get me wrong. These houses could be very like warm and comfortable You have your sheepskin and your wool and everything in there and so on. It's like, and like,
That does sound comfy, to be honest.
I mean, I've slept in plenty of Viking houses over the years, and in sheepskin and wool, in the summertime, because that's usually when you do that kind of stuff. But yeah, and you can make these places very comfortable, but that's nonetheless, you're still dealing with a lot of hard toiling to make it comfortable. And that's another aspect of all of this. So what happens in a place like Iceland over the winter? Well, it snows over. So you're stuck in a snow pile, right? And a pile of snow underneath that in a house. Can you shovel your way out? Yeah, sure, you probably can, right? But it's not like today where you have roads and you have a snow plow.
Yeah, what are you going to do when you shovel yourself out? Just look at all the snow.
You will be looking at all the snow. And so there's, the amount of activity that you are capable of doing in those Arctic and subarctic areas in the North Atlantic.
A lot of children.
It's like, yeah.
A lot of baby making.
A lot of baby making, a lot of like sitting around and telling each other ghost stories and stories about ancient heroes and all that stuff. And then, of course, once the snow melts, that's when, boom, then you're moving around again, and life moves outside.
People say they're bored now, and can you imagine being stuck in a small house with 3 generations of your family? I like my family. I love my family. I'll go as far as say I love my family. Like probably shouldn't have been the first word out. I love my family. Now, I would not want to be trapped in a small house for months and I can't think of anything worse. I'd chance myself outside with snow. So it must have been so boring.
Right? It must have been boring. It must have been, it required another level of tolerance that I don't think modern people are capable of.
No, you'd come to
can't even figure out living in societies.
No, yeah. I wonder how many times the snow melted and they went around the house and it was just everyone was dead. Everybody was just, there was like something in there happened and nobody will ever know what, but something happened enough that everybody got killed.
I mean, there are plenty of stories about that stuff from, later eras, but like, Greenland. So if we go to Inuit Folktales, like from Greenland and Canada, some of the more popular ones are the ones about crazy people killing each other and eating each other and those kinds of things. That seems to have been a real, very valid fear among Inuit. Because Inuit, of course, have been living in these conditions for millennia, right?
Well, I guess that's the other thing, is that if you know the snow's coming, you have to keep a certain amount of food inside the house, at least with where you can get to it. But if you plan wrong or you don't have a good enough harvest and all the snow stays around longer than you expect, you're going to get hungry. So if they're in with me and I'm getting hungry, someone's getting eaten.
Yep.
So that must have happened plenty of times.
That definitely happened, judging from, as I said, all the folktales about cannibalism. Which you find, in general, in the Northern Hemisphere, it's not just among Inuit, but we also have plenty of folktales about cannibalism in Europe. Hansel and Gretel is a story about cannibalism. It's a story about not being able to feed your children. A story about, some people will eat you, right? And that's from Bavaria. And so And it's not, these stories aren't just like made up to like fuck with people or scary horror or anything like that. These stories come from, you know, real life experiences that humans have had,
I mean,
right?
I don't want to go too dark, but that has got to be horrific if you're stuck in a house and everybody knows there's not enough food and everybody's getting hungry and people must start looking around like who's getting eaten. Now that's, you laugh because it's dark humor, but that must have been a terrifying position to be in. Like absolutely, because you can't escape either. There's no that you cannot get out of there, and no one's coming to help you. So you just got
No,
to
I
make yourself
mean,
tasty or make
well,
yourself untasty.
there's the other option, and that is like for somebody to leave or somebody to be put out, which is
Mm.
something that, you know, we know from Scandinavian history happened as well.
How annoying would you have to be where they don't want to eat you? They want to put you out instead.
Well,
To put into perspective for everybody, over the past 18 months, most people listen to this will have been in some form of lockdown. And people have struggled with a modern day lockdown in your fairly decent sized house compared. I mean, no matter how small your house is, it's probably not going to be as small as a Viking Age house. And you also have access to the internet, Netflix, all these things to keep you preoccupied. And yet people have still really struggled with being kept in and locked up. So imagine what it would be like just in one room of your house with your entire family, with no TV, no radio, no podcasts, no Netflix, no anything to pass the time other than actually having to talk to each other, I guess.
yep. And you know, it's so interesting to consider because we can compare the current modern situation that we have had here, and all our the psychological damage that we suffered and all that stuff. You can compare that to the plague. There's plenty of source material on how people cope with the plague.
Mm-hmm.
The Camerone, for instance, in Italian work, um, is just amazing. That's a setting where, you know, the um, we're dealing with these um, this group of people who have escaped. The author is Boccaccio, but they've escaped. I can't remember which city it is. Maybe it's Florence. Yeah, it's Florence. Um, and are like you know, hiding out in the countryside, and then they're sitting there telling each other really raunchy stories, sex stories out in the countryside. And you know, there are more and other you know, awesome sources on like how people cope with this and handled all of that stuff back in the day with the plague, which was a much more severe pandemic than the one that we have been suffering through now.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and it's the same, you know, with some of the sagas from Iceland and other, you know, literature from the medieval period in the North Atlantic and in Scandinavia. It actually gives us an insight into what how people handled and thought about different kinds of, you know, plagues or pandemics or whatever epidemics that they faced. The the sagas about Greenland, for instance, you know, Eric the Red saga and the saga about Vinland, um, also address this subject of illnesses and all that stuff. This It's actually quite interesting. It seems like the Icelanders kind of suffered, or Icelanders and Greenlanders suffered a trauma of some kind that had to do with a possible plague in Greenland. It's
Mm-hmm.
like everything just goes wrong over there for the Vikings who settled there.
Because it's such a harsh climate. I don't think you're meant to live there. it's
Oh, we're humans. We can live anywhere.
oh yeah, absolutely.
Just look at the Inuit. They are doing perfectly fine in the Arctic.
Well, yeah, that's a good point actually. But I mean, I've only ever been to Iceland once, and I've never seen snow like it. I've never seen snow like it. It was coming sideways, and I was like, "Fuck, live it." I'm going into a nice warm hotel, but fuck arriving here. And the first time, if I was in the Viking Age, the first time I ever saw it snow like that, if I survived, I'd be back on my ship and I would be somewhere else, south. It's warmer.
There's a reason I live this far up in the mountains. I mean, it's not like it's easy to live up here.
No, you got a glutton for the cold.
Yeah, no, I mean, where I am at is that's the closest I can get to, something that reminds me of living in Iceland or Greenland. Because, I could live a much more, quote unquote, comfortable life down on the plains. I mean, it's not snowing on the plains. I don't think so, at least. It's usually 10 degrees, maybe 15 degrees warmer down there. Like literally in the springtime, it's, commuting between Boulder and where I live up in the mountains is commuting between summer and winter. So that's Shan is telling us it's not snowing, but it is chilly. Okay, well.
No, yeah, that's a good point, because for me, my ideal place to live would be just in a little farmhouse in the middle of a field with nobody
like
around.
a hobbit. You want to be a hobbit.
Yeah, but that's because Yorkshire is just full of beautiful fields and little farmhouses put around. I'm like, that's what I want.
That's fair. That's fair.
I want nobody around me, and I just want my little workshop and a little farmhouse and all the animals I can get, and I would be happy. Oh, and obviously Sarah, but I felt that one was. I feel like I've just put my foot right in it, but I felt like that was obvious. But then as I was going on and naming the animals, I was like, well, maybe it's not obvious. So let's do it in late, and then it just sounds even worse.
Yes, man. Now you're up for a spanking after this episode.
That's it. Let's wrap this one up? I think we're an hour and 15, hour and 20.
But I just want to, wrap this one up with a little rant or disclaimer. It's like those, awesome Viking houses, with the curved walls and the curved roofs and, with dragons on them and all that stuff, right? They show up in the very end of the Viking Age, and they seem, to be, we know them as the Trelleborg style houses, and we know them to be mostly associated with the Christian king Harald Bluetooth and other, in that time period. So, they don't seem to be much related to that cool pagan Viking wielding his axe and conquering England, as much as they're more associated with that Christian Viking king who is a little more measured and civilized.
We almost went one whole episode without upsetting the Viking bros, but you had to do it right at the end.
I had to punch them in the nuts. Yes.
You had to get them right at the end. No, this is fun. I enjoy these episodes where it's just me and you. They're a little bit sillier than the others and kind of all over the place. But I think we cover some good topics and learn some interesting thing. Apparently,
I think so too.
Apparently potatoes are to blame for colonization. Never knew that.
They're a pretty big part of it, yeah.
So yeah, no, this is fun. It's like I say, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, I look forward to doing these. I've got my topic for next time already lined up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna let it out now so people can wait for it, I guess. And it is Iceland part of Scandinavia? That's my topic, and because I recently saw some people arguing one way or the other, Some people say
wonderful can of worms.
some people say it is, some people say it isn't. It seems like Icelanders get upset and say that it is, and Scandinavian people, or like, you know, the typical kind of Sweden, Norway, Denmark, say it's not. So yeah,
I am looking forward to pissing off pretty much everybody in the North Atlantic and Scandinavia with my comments on that.
There we go. So that's going to be my topic next time round, which I look forward to finding out the answer to, because I also have had disagreements with people over whether Iceland is Scandinavian or not. And Frederick in the chat already shouted no straight away. So it's going to be a decisive one.
He's on fire.
So therefore, you can think of another topic you want to rant about next time.
I will, if I'm not, dying from the last bit of COVID coughing hangover that I'm suffering from right now.
I know you keep having to mute the microphone because you're having coughing fits. But ever the professional, nobody can tell.
Except for when they're watching the video and they just see me coughing with no sound on.
Or I just grass you up. He's done it again. That's why he's not replying. All right, let's wrap this up. If obviously I'm going to do Mathias for him. If you want to follow Mathias, it's at Mathias Nordvig on Instagram. Not even going to bother it. If you enjoy the show, please take a minute to leave us a 5-star rating and a positive review. It really does help people find the show. I think we've got 250 5-star reviews now or something like that. It's amazing. I love reading the comments. So please do take a minute just to write a review. It makes when we get a new 5-star review, it makes my day. Genuinely does just it makes me happy because we put a lot of love and effort into this. We put out we give it a lot of time of our own time to do the show. So reading those little moments of knowing that people enjoy what we do, it really does make me happy.
It makes me happy too.
And you're happy when I'm happy.
Yeah. And when we get a 1-star review, we're gonna shame that person.
No, because now people are gonna give us 1-star reviews just to hear us shame them.
Oh, of course, yeah, to get fame. Yeah.
Don't do that.
We'll silence you instead.
Yeah, we won't talk about it at all. If you enjoy what we do, the best way to support us will be through Patreon. It really helps us kind of just get a little bit of money involved. Lets us, like I say, I'm going to try and build a new studio. That's from people supporting us on Patreon. Mathias is going to do the same. So the sound quality is going to get better. The video is going to get better. Sham behind the scenes does an amazing job editing all the shows. He really does an amazing job. So it helps us pay for Shan as well. And then we've got the Saxon storyteller who does all the artwork. There's quite a big team behind the podcast now, and all these people, we like to try and look after them where we can. And that comes from those who help us out on Patreon. Also, you get an extra bonus show every week. Either me and Mathias will sit down and watch an episode of Vikings where Mathias will tell you all about the houses or anything that he just doesn't think is accurate in the Vikings. It's all things that we enjoy and we do like, and they always end up being a good laugh. Or the other bonus shows every other week. Jonas Lorentzen is going to come on and be the narrator for our Storytime episodes where we go through a saga of the Volsungs. At the minute, we're on the 2nd episode next week of that. And those are really amazing. He does a really good job. He's got a whole host of different voices. So if you want to help us out, it's Nordic Mythology Patreon.com/Nordic Mythology podcast. And there we go. Let's wrap it up.
That's the show.
That's it. Perfect. Thank you very much.